If you would like to support the podcast and get some extra content while you're there, head on over to patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast and sign up. From the rewatch to the Q&A, we will have loads of content every week. So sign up, patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. And now, here's the podcast. Welcome everybody. It's episode 401 of the Severe MMA podcast. My name is Sean Sheehan, aka the Pod God, joined today by the Adama Traore of Irish MMA media, Graeme McDonald, as we talk about. Do you know what? We were thinking we were recording a little bit early and then we're going to record the rest afterwards. We're thinking, do you know what? There isn't much news. There's a good card coming up next week. There's bits and pieces of cards this week, which we'll obviously get to and stuff. And then we had some breaking news announcements from Dana White, confirming one of our reports, but we will get to that all in a second. And before we do, we must tell you that this episode of the podcast is brought to you by our friends over at Manscaped. Roses are red, violets are blue. Our friends at Manscaped have a gift for you. They're now selling beard products. That's right. The leader in below-the-waist grooming has revolutionized the men's hygiene game once again with the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. It all starts with the Beard Hedger. This cordless trimmer has a rotary wheel with 20 hair cutting lengths, all with one guard. So no more messy drawers full of extra add-ons. With this kit, it's never easier to sculpt your precise look at adding in. So make sure you're looking extra lovely this Valentine's Day by using the Beard Hedger. And even better, save 20% and free shipping by going to manscaped.com and using the promo code SevereMMA. The Beard Hedger Pro Kit is the ultimate tool to get the perfect Valentine's Day look. Over 7 million men worldwide are already using Manscaped, so it's your time to join in too. The Beard Hedger is an electric beard hair trimmer, an absolutely premium for beard sculpting machines. Along with having only one guard, leaving little mess, it's also waterproof, so you can shave in the shower and do all of that. It has a titanium coated T-blade, which is tough on hair but smooth on your face. The Manscaped and Valentine's Day are a perfect pair, and the new Beard Hedger Pro Kit doesn't end there. They have 4 dermatologist tested formulations for your post-trim hygiene. The beard shampoo and conditioner, the beard oil, and the beard balm as well. They're all absolutely brilliant. The beard oil is for if you've a little bit of brittle or dry hair. We know what the shampoo and conditioner are for, to replace the natural oils and promote beard health as well. They're really, really good. And the beard balm as well, to get your shape, styles, and moisturising that old beard. Comes with 3 free gifts as well. The Beard Hedger Pro Kit, a beard brush, comb and scissors to ensure you have all the tools for the perfect beard. From first impression to last, you're going to love it, and everyone who sees your improved facial hair game will love it too. No one likes a weird beard. So say goodbye to all your stubble and trouble and tame your mane this Valentine's Day. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code SevereMMA at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Use the promo code SevereMMA. Spice up Valentine's Day this year with Manscaped's Beard Hedger. 1 stroke, 1 guard, 20 links. Right, Graeme, let's talk a little bit about mixed martial arts. And before we get into the actual fights and stuff itself, I suppose, it has been confirmed by Dana White that Conor McGregor will coach the 31st series, I believe, of The Ultimate Fighter opposite Michael Chandler. We obviously reported the news last week that McGregor was in, which is, you know, a little bit of a relief, I suppose, for us that it has been made official now. You know, we were very, very confident. Obviously, we had very good sources.
Were you sweating it, John? Were you?
It was more you now. It was more your report than my report, but I wasn't sweating it. Were you sweating it? The sources were pretty good, weren't they? So I don't think we had any...
No, I wasn't sweating it. I think, you know, a lot of people were kind of thinking that it was going to be Tony, and even when Bisping was talking about it on his podcast, he had said that we reported it was Tony, which we didn't, just to clear that up. But obviously it's Michael Chandler, and I think, you know, I think that's a really good fight. Obviously, me and you talked on the podcast for months now about Tony being a nice comeback fight and things like that. But, you know, in terms of excitement for this fight, I'd say, you know, he'll probably be on a similar level to Tony, if not even bigger, by the time it comes around.
I would agree on that point. I don't think it's look like a lot of things that happen in the UFC these days, like Max Holloway versus Arnold Allen as well. Very good fight, both of those fights, but bad matchmaking. I think I'm not a big fan of the matchmaking at all. Like, to give McGregor that sort of opponent at this time in his career, coming off of a broken leg, coming off of a couple of losses, coming off of a long time out, I think it's a very, very unnecessarily tough matchup. Like, give him Tony in this one and didn't give him Chandler next. I'm not saying like baby McGregor for the rest of his career or anything like that. I couldn't be further from the truth. But get one fight against a guy like Tony Ferguson, who is he still ranked top 15? If not, he was just before his last fight. I know he's taken a bit of a downfall.
I don't think the rankings even matter that much. No, but maybe it came down to a thing of Tony wanting more money to do TUF or more money to fight or things like that. Maybe Tony was considered, but maybe there's other things going on. But obviously we talked about it in the past, as I mentioned, and Tony did seem like the perfect opponent. Maybe that's why people were kind of assuming that, but it's definitely a bigger ask. Chandler's definitely a bigger ask to come back after a long time off on a big injury like a broken leg, and it's definitely going to be if their previous fights are anything to go by, it's going to be a firefight, and it's going to be very exciting. But yeah, I think we both agree that it would have been more a nice matchup for Conor if he went in there against Tony, somebody who doesn't really have too much knockout power and who's very hittable. But yeah, for the fans, obviously, I think this is going to be an exciting season of The Ultimate Fighter that will get people back invested in The Ultimate Fighter in some capacity anyway. And that's obviously the UFC. That's probably a big part of their thinking here. And they haven't announced a date for the fight yet, but they've announced that they will fight. There was a bit of speculation that maybe Conor would coach against somebody that he wouldn't end up fighting, like the Uriah Faber season that he did before. But according to Dana White on the announcement anyway, there's going to be obviously a fight between Chandler and Conor at the end. So yeah, I think it's obviously a long way away. We don't even have a date yet, but it's obviously a top level matchup to come back from such an injury against. And when we've seen people come back from big injuries in the past, it's usually not going to end too well. But Chandler's going to try and, likely anyway, he might come in with a wrestling game plan. You never know. Maybe the first thing he'll do is try to double leg Conor. But if I say the expectation anyway is that he's going to stand and trade with Conor, and that's exactly what Conor wants, I suppose. So yeah, obviously we'll talk about it a lot coming up. But yeah, it's definitely maybe a fight that we would have expected after maybe a Tony fight or a similar warm-up fight. Yeah,
I think the one thing you have to say about McGregor, for a guy who unfairly, I think, but had the reputation at one stage for being, babied a bit with the matchmaking or whatever, and I think that's dead and buried now. He's coming back to this fight.
Wasn't some other fighter saying recently, even like in the last few days, he just handpicks his fights? But
yeah, it's ridiculous. He came back. That's been true at all. He came back to fight Habib after like two or 3 years out as well, didn't he? Like, you just could not say that. But I think the UFC are at a very weird place with McGregor in terms of how you matchmake him, because he is the biggest star in the history of the sport. He's going to go in there and he's going to draw the biggest pay-per-view numbers for the UFC. They know it. Everyone knows it. And you almost can't put him in there against a nobody, because he is going to be in that position. You can't put him in there in a co-main event or in a card opener. Like, if it was another fighter, you probably could. Like, let's say Dustin Poirier now got a bad injury and he was coming back. You could put him in there against someone a little bit down the rankings. Looking, the lightweight rankings are going to probably fight someone hard, but you could put him in a good card opener. The next one, you could put him against Chandler, and if he wins 2 in a row, could be in a title fight. With McGregor, you can't do that, because, like, with all due respect, I have great respect for Dustin Poirier and all the guys I named there. They're not drawing 1 million pay-per-view buys, They're not going to be on the top of the cards. You don't have a responsibility to the fans and to the people buying it, and to your bottom line as well, if we're being honest, to put the best fight, the biggest name possible within reason, against someone like McGregor, where you don't have to do it for nearly anyone else. John Jones, the John Jones situation was a bit different, I suppose. He went away as champion and all that, whereas McGregor is coming off of the bad injury and a couple of losses as well. But that's all well and good from the UFC's point of view. It's understandable, but the reason I called it bad matchmaking earlier is because from McGregor's point of view and from the long-term point of view of McGregor and his drawing power for the UFC, I just can't fathom why you wouldn't take the hit this time or go against what I just said there this time to get a longer draw out of McGregor for more fights for a long time. Now, if he loses this, he'll still come back and he'll fight again. But you know what I mean? There's a point you need to reach where you have to get McGregor to a place where you want him back consistently winning and fighting. And I don't know if this is the fight. Now, maybe it is. And he said himself the other day on Instagram about, I need full immersion, and being in Vegas for 3 months isn't the best thing in the world, but being in like a fight camp all the time for 3 months, if he gets in there and he's training with the lads or getting back and being part of it, maybe that's what he does need to get back his mindset into MMA more than anything else. Because we know, look, McGregor's an unbelievable athlete. We know he has the physicality and he stays in good shape. A lot of people were saying about him, he's blown up in size and all of that, but he can, he can quickly get into fight shape again. There's no doubt about that. I think it is the mindset. It's impossible not to have an adjusted mindset to come where he's come from, to go where he went to, and to where he is now after, the couple of losses, the broken leg, the selling all the whiskey, the court cases, all of this. It's impossible not to be changed. And maybe, to pare it all back, to get back to MMA, to get back in the gym, with 15, 20 lads or whatever it might be. Maybe that's the way to do it. Maybe that is the way to do it. I don't know, but it sounds like a good idea to be able to do it that way. So we'll forget about the fight for a second. But it
kind of depends how close the fight is to the filming, really. You know what I mean? Maybe the fight will be a lot of months afterwards, and it won't really be relevant. Ariel
said, and let me just pull it up here, but I don't want to quote him. I don't want to quote him wrong or anything. But he said it's going to be from April. The filming of The Ultimate Fighter until around September. I'm just pulling it up here now, so let me get it straight here. So, he said that the season runs from May until August. Last I heard, the hope was them to fight in September. So that's a few weeks after the end of filming or the end of the season. I think it'll be very interesting how that happens. Because you said, like, okay, it's not obviously it's not going to air straight away in terms of after filming, but like a pre-camp to get into a proper camp as well might be a good way for McGregor to do it too, because it's like it's the next 6 months, next 7 months, so up until September here, are the biggest of McGregor's career in terms of his future. Like, okay, nothing will ever surpass the 11 months and those 4 fights. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. But this is the biggest time outside of that, let's say, it's the biggest time of his career, because this will determine if he can get back into the mindset, like even win or lose in that fight, if he can get back to fitness, back into the mindset, back into is he going to be an MMA fighter anymore? Is he going to be a celebrity that fights once every 18 months? That's the big thing here, and I'm very interested to see that. And we don't talk about him that much in this podcast, even though he's the biggest star in the history of the sport. But it's good to be able to talk about him in a fighting manner. It's good to be able to talk about John Jones coming back and other things as well. And, it's still a long time for it to happen, but I'm looking forward to it, and I can't wait, Graeme. Look, we don't know about the season yet in terms of the weight classes and all. I know that was kind of moving back and forward. There was rumours of 2 Irish guys we talked about last week. Dean Barry came out and tweeted that he was one of them, and that visa issues again, it seems to always be Dean Barry's problem. He's not able to go, and I believe the other fighter, Graeme, is not going to be in it either. So I wonder if there's any strings McGregor can pull, maybe get a couple of different lads in there or something like that, and get him in. I think for Irish eyes that'd be absolutely great, and hopefully he can do that. He's always kind of done that for his teammates, so hopefully that is something that can happen. But yeah, are you hoping to see a few of them? What are your big hopes, I suppose, for the next few months for McGregor and for what he does with TUF?
Well, it would obviously be nice to have a couple of Irish guys there, at least people that we've heard of, or who are actual prospects, instead of, a lot of seasons of the Ultimate Fighter have been kind of very roughly put together with not a lot of potential in the talent, it seems. So it'd be nice to have some known quantities or some hot prospects in there, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it's not that, but maybe they'll make a big effort here, because obviously this is kind of a big chance for them and ESPN to kind of revive the Ultimate Fighter series that's kind of been forgotten about, and that even us as media don't really watch anymore, and most people don't watch anymore. So maybe they will pull a few strings, and maybe having an Irish fighter in there would add to things for the Irish side of things. But I think it's more important that they just have some kind of known quantities, or not just a bunch of 3-0s or 4-0s that we type records that we maybe don't have that much potential. But yeah, it just remains to be seen. But obviously, obviously, I don't think Dana White announced anything, but it remains to be seen if it's on ESPN Plus or if it's going to be on actual TV. I think recent seasons of Ultimate Fighter have been on just a subscription service, so hopefully they put it on free TV in America and stuff, and kind of makes sense to me for them to do that if they're going to try and revive the season and they're going to try and pay. But maybe ESPN, they obviously would like to keep it on ESPN Plus probably, and get yearly subscriptions that way. So yeah, there's a lot of things up in the air, but I think obviously the Chandler and McGregor matchup as coaches, and with them fighting afterwards, definitely will bring the eyeballs, no matter who the contestants are and things like that.
Indeed, 100%. And yeah, we have a question actually that came in last week. I must ask you for a second, but just on our report as well, I think we kind of mentioned at the start there, but I think the fact that we had a few people who knew us saying this is true because they're saying it, and then a lot of people who didn't know us going like, oh, are these guys lying? Or like, I know Bisping did it and stuff like that, but it was just kind of good again to show like, well, we are, we're trying to do what we actually do. I did a conversation with Spencer the other day and talking about how, obviously myself on the way up and yourself on the way up, we were kind of thrown into covering this sport, and we had to learn how to do it the right way. And I think this probably shows that we try to do that. I know, like, we've had fights and announcements and things before that we haven't pulled the trigger on, and then someone else has announced them and we've lost out on them just because we're trying to hold out for official confirmation or a second or third source or something like that. And I think because we've always done that, I think when we actually pull the trigger on something like this, you can know it's true, and I'm glad we did that, and I'm glad everyone has seen now. So that's absolutely good. But anyway,
and I enjoyed your little Instagram or TikTok video of the Bisping.
That would imagine if it didn't. Imagine if they announced it was like fucking Dustin Poirier against Michael Chandler. I would look like some bollocks if that's something like that. But we're glad we got it right anyway. Right, to answer this question from Andrew, it's a question for you. And to quote the question here is, as a fan of the sport, it was inspiring to see McGregor's rise. I recently rewatched Graeme's 2014 notorious RT documentary that followed McGregor in the build-up to the Holloway fight. I was struck by how driven he was, but in a joyous way. You could see the killer instinct. He seemed like a humble, decent guy with a fantastic work ethic and ability. Contrast that representation of him with the negative aspects of how his life has proceeded. Hitting the old man and all the allegations that have been brought against him. I'm wondering how you, Graeme, settle it in your mind. Was his brash and at times grim side always there and representing the finished documentary, or is it something that has emerged with $50 million and more heavy blows to the head? Thanks, guys, and keep up the great work. What do you think about that, Graeme? There's definitely, even if he hasn't changed, the thought of him, I think, has definitely changed over the years, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, I definitely think he's changed. I think you can see from not just our documentaries and content, but just through all videos throughout the years, and how kind of on the up, it was more kind of happy, and I suppose when your dreams are coming true, people have talked about it to death, like the motivating yourself after you've already kind of reached the peak or whatever, and all that stuff. That's just a natural thing, and with all the the controversies and things like that, like he mentioned the man in the pub and stuff like that. obviously there's stupid things to do that you shouldn't do and that are like a stain in your character and stuff. But I don't think there was stuff like, from my knowledge anyway, I don't think there was like stuff that we didn't put in the Max Holloway documentary or anything that was happening at the time. At the time, we were just recording what we saw, and what we saw was him, flying around the place, doing media, fighting regularly, training, in his house with his parents, just all the stuff that's in the documentary. So I think that was what was happening at the time, and, a lot of fame and money and, problems that kind of stuff brings came along, and they change a person, you know what I mean? They definitely, and even the new fame as well, the kind of glow of like everybody wanted to take a photo with you or screaming fans and all. I'm sure that stuff gets old pretty quickly. Even like being around Conor and filming, like all that stuff gets kind of annoying after a while, you know what I mean? And it's not even directed at me or the crew around him or whatever. It's directed at him, obviously. So all the circumstances would change anybody, I think, as a person. So yeah, I think he's definitely, changed in front of the public eye as everybody has been able to see. Yeah,
I would agree. But it's a very interesting though, because I remember someone wrote an article about it years ago about the first thing that ever happened, like with McGregor, whatever it was at the time, when he was like, everyone was dressing up as him and going to Vegas and all of this stuff. And then there was some, maybe it was even a Dennis Siver one or whatever it was. And the media, especially in Ireland, very quickly turned on him. And look, for lots of different things, he deserves criticism. We've criticised him here. But it felt like sometimes there's a divide in perception between like what people expect to be seen from a sports star and, what the real life of sometimes a sports star is, especially in a sport that, it's not hurling or football or soccer or rugby or whatever, and we've seen that, I think, a little bit with boxing as well and other things down through the years, that like and it's maybe even a class divide, and I think McGregor was like the old school, like, built up to knock him down thing by a certain brand of people, which, look, he deserves to be knocked down for a lot of things he'd done. There's no doubt about that. But if he'd never done them, there were still
he wasn't held up like he should have been before all the kind of incidents that people, that turned people off for genuine reasons. I think maybe it would have been different if he was a boxer, because I think the Irish public and Irish media in general kind of only begrudgingly accepted MMA as like a sport, even like for years at the start of like the kind of explosion of Irish MMA. They wanted to talk about how it's barbaric and all the kind of negative sides, but never about the positives and things like that. So I think maybe, that played a big part in it, I think.
And you can see that now, like, they don't even talk about the sport. There's nowhere covering the sport off the ball or any of them. Never, unless they're fucking paid by Virgin Media and have a deal to cover a Bellator card and they get Will Fleury in or something like that. That's all they're doing now. Having said that as well, I'm absolutely not saying McGregor's blameless for any of that or anything, but I think he really fed into that. Like, there was a time there when he was like going on the Late Late Show and he'd do, it was Irish, he'd do everything, and I think he hasn't done any of that in a real long time. And I remember there was a call there at one stage like, oh, McGregor needs to go back on the Late Late Show and win the Irish crowd back and everything like that. And I think maybe I even bought into that for a while, but I quickly think that I think he's kind of fallen away from that sort of thing. He's like, well, I'm grand, I'll do my own thing. And I think he's gone totally away from that. And then with all the behaviour and all the issues that have happened down through the years, it has brought him even further away into that divide. And there's a lot of fans who would have been anti like the coverage and would agree with everything I just said there, but then went anti McGregor as well because it just went too far on many different occasions. And those people, they're very hard to disagree with. I wouldn't disagree with them myself. I don't think any people would at all. So look, it'll be interesting to see how McGregor rebounds and how this TUF helps or hinders him, how living in Vegas helps or hinders him for a while, because like if you think about it, there haven't been that many incidents over the last while. There's been obviously some things obviously always come out and there's allegations and things like that, but at one stage it felt like there was something every 2 or 3 weeks from McGregor, but over the last like year and a half, there really hasn't been loads of things. So I'm interested to see how he has changed again, I suppose, maybe after getting more used to dealing with all the fame and all like that. So I suppose that's something we will see coming up over the next couple of years, I suppose. But however, let's move on. Let's move on and talk about some fights, and let's talk about next week's fight before we get to the action from this weekend. And we have an absolutely massive card in UFC 284 with what to me is going to be the maybe not the biggest fight of the year, but the best fight of the year in terms of quality, between Islam Makhachev, the lightweight champion, in a super fight against Alexander Volkanovski, a genuine super fight, not one of these bullshit super fights that people make up. We also have Yair Rodriguez versus Josh Emmett for the interim title at featherweight in the co-main event. And then there's other fights on the card as well. Not a massive great card. I love the Jack Della Maddalena Randy Brown fight, but other than that, nothing really loads stands out. But let's talk about the top 2 fights, and especially Makhachev versus Volkanovski. And Graeme, just before I throw it over to you, like my anticipation and my levels of love for this fight is massive. Both of these lads have talked about the coverage of this fight, and the build up for this fight hasn't been great, hasn't been enough, and hopefully that'll ramp up. But I agree with him, it hasn't, because this is a special fight. This is the pound for pound number 1 fighter in the world against the number 1 fighter in the number 1 division in the world. That is special. This is a guy who has beaten Max Holloway, one of the best fighters in the world, multiple times, after beating Jose Aldo, after beating Chad Mendes, after showing how unbelievable of a fighter he is against Makhachev, who is, the next level of Khabib Nurmagomedov, who was the pound for pound king at the time when he retired, and he's taken over the mantle and destroyed the last champion who was beating the shit out of lads before him. It's the Dagestani wrestler against the unbelievable striker. You couldn't want a better matchup than this. I absolutely love it. What I'm so interested in this matchup, right, is, okay, the question is always, can anyone, whoever he's fighting, stop the wrestling of Makhachev? Can they do it? But you look at Volkanovski and you just see how unbelievable his striking is. Like, myself and Harry have a podcast coming out next week. I did over in Sherdog with Harry. It was great to have him on, and we kind of broke down all the intricacies of it. But for Volkanovski, the way he moves, the way he adjusts second by second in the fight, while at all times staying defensively so sound, makes a matchup against him so unbelievably tough. And even to time your takedowns, or time a place where Alexander Volkanovski is vulnerable, is extremely, extremely hard, even for a guy who all his opponents are vulnerable at all times because of the way he fights in Makhachev. It's the the rock and the hard place, going up against each other. This is a fucking brilliant matchup. I absolutely cannot wait for it. What's your take on it, Graeme?
Yeah, I'm really excited for this one. Obviously, me and you have talked about Volkanovski a lot and how underrated he is, and how he should get a lot more respect and adulation and things like that. But if he can come in here and implement a solid game plan and stick to it, like he's shown so many times against high caliber guys like you mentioned, like Max Holloway and things like that, would I be that surprised if he wins? Not really, but I think the size difference is going to be something here, and obviously the wrestling. If he ends up on the bottom, will he be able to get up without losing the kind of pep in his step, which is so important to his game? I think he can a couple of times, but if the takedowns are there more often, it becomes a little trickier. But I looked at the odds, and obviously he's a big underdog here, Volkanovski. Bigger than I expected. Obviously, it's stepping up a weight class, and that hasn't gone well in a lot of situations before. But he's been kind of planning this for a while, and was an alternative at this weight, an alternate at this weight before. So he's kind of been in the 155 kind of mind frame and training that way for a while now. So I wouldn't put as much weight into that as I usually would, but. It's hard to pick Volkanovski here. There's definitely ways he can win, but gun to my head, Makhachev, I think, be too big and strong in the wrestling department. But as you mentioned, he you have to get a hold of Volkanovski, and his striking is really, really good, and his speed and footwork, and as I mentioned, his game planning and implementation of game plans. So yeah, I think this is maybe a closer fight than a closer fight. I expected it to be closer on the betting lines than it is, but I'd still probably lean Makhachev.
I think I lean Volkanovski, honestly. I just think he's so good. I think he's unbelievably good. I just wonder, I think about Demetrius Johnson all the time as the top tier fighter in the world, and I've put Volkanovski up there with him, and I've never put anyone close to that. But how was Mighty Mouse beaten in the day when he was beaten? It was up a weight, it was against Dominic Cruz, when he was able to just outsize him and push him against the cage and kind of hold himself over him. Now, there isn't as much of a size difference here as people would think. Maybe I know there's 4 inches in height, maybe, but I think Volkanovski has a longer reach than Makhachev by an inch. I think Harry was saying that, and Volkanovski fights very long as well. So, there's no one, I think, in the world of MMA at the moment who's as good at keeping someone at the end of their jab and keeping someone rattled as Volkanovski is. And there's no one as good at defensively as Volkanovski is. There's no one with as good of a variation in their striking to add to their footwork as Volkanovski is at the moment. And that's such a tough prospect for Makhachev. But the thing about this one is, right, we can analyse it. We can talk about how good Makhachev is. He's wrestling, and there's no one as good probably in the world at doing what Makhachev does either. And we won't know until the door closes on Saturday. And that's what fights are all about. That's why we love this shit. Sometimes we can say, right, if this happens, this guy will win. If that happens, that guy wins. You're even saying there, if Makhachev does get a couple of takedowns, it's a good sign, obviously, but it doesn't guarantee it. How long will it take for Volkanovski to be completely taken out of his game? And will he be completely taken out of his game? Same goes for Volkanovski. If he wins, say, the first couple of rounds, let's say the fight gets a little bit tired, and Makhachev starts to get takedowns in the 3rd, 4th and 5th, it could change very, very quickly, or one person could win and dominate it. Either way, it's impossible to call this, and that is the key. That is the key. A close fight is always a good fight, but then you have a close fight against 2 of the best fighters in the world, 25-1 against 23-1. What a fucking fight. What a fight this is. I absolutely love it beyond belief, and I absolutely can't wait for it.
It ticks the loads of boxes. Obviously, it has the two champions. It has the jeopardy. It has the unknown, as you mentioned. It has the kind of style clashes as well, and both guys have the ability to finish the fight in multiple ways, and both guys have the ability to win a decision. So yeah, I can't wait, and hopefully it lives up to the expectation. But either way, it's going to answer a lot of questions, and it's going to be intriguing. And I do expect it to be a banger, and I do expect. I think it's likely that we'll have ups and downs from both sides, ebbs and flows, and that I'm expecting a classic, to be honest. Hopefully they're not the famous last words for this fight, but I really think this is going to be a really exciting, really good fight.
Yeah, for Volkanovski, if he wins it, it's another step to all-time greatness. And for Makhachev, if he wins it there, it's probably the second step to being one of the greatest lightweights of all time. Because if he can beat Volkanovski, I don't think there's many coming afterwards that are going to test him as much as Volkanovski would. I think, I honestly, that's how good I think he is.
Good time for Volkanovski to get him. It's probably better than waiting a few fights. Obviously he's experienced and stuff, but Volkanovski's been a champion for a long time, been 5 rounds a long time, and Makhachev is obviously at the top for a reason, but maybe lacks experience in as much experience as Volkanovski in terms of that. So yeah, it's just really intriguing.
The one thing I would say before we move on to the next fight, I went back, sometimes you watch fights and you watch them for their opponents. So the last time I watched Makhachev fights, I was watching it because he was fighting Charles Oliveira, but now I'm watching it because he's fighting Volkanovski, and I'm there's way more flaws to pick out when you match someone up against a flawless fighter like Volkanovski. And the way, even anyone listen to this, watch the first 10 seconds, maybe 20 seconds of the Makhachev fight against Oliveira, and now he kind of falls over on his back leg, and he does it so many times, and he puts himself off balance. And I also think he really puts himself in danger to land big shots because he knows people are kind of afraid that the takedown is coming, so he can manage to do that. But if someone isn't afraid that the takedown is coming and has such confidence in their striking that they will fight with someone like Makhachev, I think they could open up the flaws, the off-balanced nature, the kind of the not using his lint maybe as well as, obviously not as well as Volkanovski, but not as well as he should. He has good striking in terms of he can hit really hard, and he's a good jab, and he's all very good fundamental punches, I would say. I'm not sure he's the best fundamental, like, defensive striker in the world, like a Volkanovski especially, but I'm holding him to a higher standard here. I probably didn't even get close to saying those things against Charles Oliveira, because Oliveira, similar, very good puncher, maybe not the best defensive or fundamental striker in the world if held up against the likes of that. So I just wonder if that becomes a factor. Like, if Makhachev takes Volkanovski down, even though Volkanovski's good on the ground, he's not going to be able to match up with Makhachev. If Makhachev gets stuck fighting on the feet against Volkanovski, even though he's very good, in my opinion, I don't think he's going to be able to live with Volkanovski's ability on the feet. So it's so intriguing. But the thing about it is, in the UFC, for Volkanovski, he's never been shown up in terms of the wrestling or grappling like that. He got caught in a dead-on guillotine by Ortega. He got out of it and won the fight easily. For Makhachev, I know he has one loss, but like, especially recently, he's never been caught out with the striking, even against someone like very good like Oliveira, but he's never fought to that level before. Not that he can't beat that level, but he's just never done it. So I'm very interested to see if he can hang with that, and I can't wait for that fight. Absolutely can't.
Yeah, well, if Makhachev can't get the takedowns, and if Volkanovski is kind of it becomes not wary of the takedowns and gets into the striking, then it's going to be, I'd say it's going to be bad news for Islam, because, as you mentioned, there definitely is a discrepancy there. It's definitely important that Makhachev doesn't give up on the chaining the takedowns together and making it uncomfortable for Volkanovski, because if he gets comfortable in there, it's Volkanovski's fight, I think. But there's definitely just a lot of questions and a lot of ways this could play out, and a lot of cards don't have main events like this that will get me as excited as this, and hopefully it lives up to expectation, as I said. But yeah, either way, I'm very excited for this, and it's probably the most excited I've been for a main event in months.
I think maybe in years for me, in terms of a technical fight. I'm so intrigued by this one. It's absolutely brilliant. Like, I can think of a few down through the years. Like the one and I've said a few times this week, and TJ Dillashaw versus Cody Garbrandt. Like, at the time, people are probably saying, "Oh, Cody Garbrandt, what the fuck are you talking about?" But at the time, that was such an intriguing matchup, and I was thinking about it for weeks and weeks before. And this one is similar. I absolutely can't wait. But the co-main event as well. Look, I couldn't help but watch the a few fights of all four of these guys and think to myself that Josh Emmett especially, but Yair Rodriguez as well, is just not within an ass's roar of fucking Alexander Volkanovski as a fighter. Just so much miles off. Like, and not to say they're not good fighters, but Volkanovski is an all-time great. He's unbelievable. But like watching Yair Rodriguez, we all know what type of fighter he is. He is the wild karateka who looks for the big shots and is loose and languid on the outside and long and throws his kicks and tries to be good defensively with his hands down on the outside. And Josh Emmett, it'll be interesting. Look, we talked about, can Makhachev manage to wrestle him, and can he not give up in it? I think it's a big thing. I think the same probably goes for Josh Emmett here, if he does wrestle, to not give up in it. But as a striker, Josh Emmett is a guy who just throws everything at everything. He just throws it 100%. There's no feints. There's no messing about. So, and not to say he's not a good fighter, not a good striker. He is, but like, it feels like he's a bit of a throwback to guys who went out there, learned how to punch, and then just punched. It feels
head down swinging.
Yeah, which is good, which is exciting as well. But I'm not sure that's going to hold up. Now, maybe it will against Rodriguez. I'm not sure.
If you can bring him with enough pressure, it's hard to deal with. If you bring him for an extended period of time with enough pressure, it can work. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he is a bit of a throwback in a way, but. Yair Rodriguez is dangerous till the end as well, and I think you can say the same about Josh Emmett. So this could end up being a really good fight as well. But I suppose for Josh Emmett, he probably doesn't want it to turn out like that. He probably wants to make it kind of drawn out, kind of scrappy affair where he can get on top for periods and kind of stifle Yair that way. But for an interim title fight, it's not really that exciting.
Yeah, I think, look, the fact that we have the champion at that weight class fighting here, the fact that we have a fight between Aaron Lallen and Max Holloway as well, which is no doubt a better fight than this in terms of quality. Both fighters deserve it more. You can understand with Max Holloway because he's lost a few in a row. It makes this one feel, if you think about it that way, it makes it feel like it's, not as worthy of a belt as other fights are. But at the same time, as we just kind of alluded to, it's a very good fight. And I think it will be a very exciting fight if, Josh Emmett doesn't manage to get his wrestling going early and often, which honestly, I don't think he will. Now, maybe I'm wrong, maybe he will, but I think Yair will avoid him for long periods early in the fight anyway. The problem is, right, and you said that they're both can go late. I think both have exceptional cardio to fight the way they do and to be able to fight well late the way they do. But there's naturally, in the third round, going to be a little bit more of a lull. Like, Yair Rodriguez can't keep moving the way he does for 5 rounds. Just no human being on earth could do that. And at that point, like, does the fight change? Does Josh Emmett come more into it? I think that's a very intriguing part of this fight.
Yeah. But he took out the Korean Zombie with a second to go in the fight.
He was losing that fight though as well as
that's true.
Yeah, so a very intriguing fight. I'm really, really looking forward to it. I think the key to this one is, can Emmett get the takedown? But I also think the key is, can Emmett get to Yair Rodriguez with his striking? And if he can, as you said there, bulldoze him forward, that's very tough to deal with. And if he can do that, there's 2 ways for him to win the fight there. For Yair, it's going to be either picking him off from the outside, making him tired by throwing all those shots and making him miss. There's nothing more tiring, as fighters say, than missing all the time. And if he can do that and continually pick him off, it could be one of those ones where, like, it comes to the second round, Emmett hasn't landed a punch hardly, and Yair Rodriguez has just picked him off with like 20 punches, and Emmett's feeling it, he's bleeding, and he ends up falling down or something like that. I could see it being one of those as well. But it's a very intriguing fight, and I think it's 2 lads who will go at it 100%, and it'll be fun. The rest of the card, as I mentioned, not amazing. Justin Taffa and Parker Porter, someone probably get knocked out in that. It'll be interesting to see Jimmy Crute bounce back here. He's fighting Alonzo Minifield, who kind of blows hot and cold, but generally that could be a good fight. As I said, Jack Della Maddalena, one of the best up-and-comers in the world, at 170 against Randy Brown. Joshua Kulabau, Graeme, who has our very own Alan Philpott in his corner. I saw him putting up a picture yesterday, I think it was. They were just finishing off camp and everything, so great to see Alan Philpott doing well there. He's obviously moved out to Australia now, so very interested to see Kulabau there. And there's a few other good fights as well on it. Zubiria Tuhugov, who assaulted Conor McGregor that time, is in there. Tyson Pedro against Melissa Spakauskas as well. The Cage Warriors light heavyweight champion is back in the UFC, and that's a very, very fun fight against 2 absolute bangers.
The first fight of the night, is it?
Yeah, maybe, but you never know. I think someone's getting absolutely fucking sparked in that anyhow. One of them, I'm not sure which one, but that's a very, very fun fight. That'd be a perfect fight for like the pay-per-view opener or the last fight on the TV card or something like that. I think that'd be a very good fight for there, but a very interesting fight. Obviously, this is in Perth as well, but you kind of forget that sometimes. But over in down in Western Australia, so should be a fun card overall, and we'll be tuning in to watch it. All right, we will. I suppose we leave it at that, Graeme, and we will head it over and throw it over to Sean Sheehan here to talk about some of the fights from last night. Take it away, Shawnee. Thank you very much, Shawnee. Well, it was a very, very long night. A very long night in the world of mixed martial arts. We had Bellator, which... what time did it start? I missed the start of it, so... but I don't think I missed too much at the start of it, because all the fights I thought I'd missed were actually moved to post-limbs, which I also missed, if I'm being honest. But I watched nearly all of the Bellator fights, and then went over to the UFC and watched the rest of them until I fell asleep during the co-main event and the main event. But yeah, it was one that went on from let's say 10 p.m. until almost 9 a.m. I would say. It's hard to remember, but it was a good 11-hour shift last night. So we'll be putting in the invoices to Graeme. We'll be putting them in to get paid for that overtime. But look, there wasn't much to write home about, if we're being honest. Maybe one top level fight, and the rest of them were, not great. The Bellator card on paper was way better than the UFC card, and it turned out to be that. So let's go through the Bellator one first, I suppose. First of all, the 4 post-lims all went to decision, and I'm sad for them poor old crowd left after the Bader and Fedor fight. It was a long old stretch there, and I'm sure those poor fighters didn't have it too easy. But Yusuf Karaka beat Ethan Hughes, Asaya Hokit beat Peter Ishiguro, Jalen Bates won a split decision over Jernel Lugo. I knew that'd be a closer fight than the betting line made out. And then Neiman Gracie beat Dante Shero, who took the fight on short notice. So a good win there for Neiman Gracie in the 170 division. On the bottom of the Bellator card, then there was another trio, I suppose, of decisions. And Nikita Mikhailov won the unanimous decision over Darian Caldwell. I know a few people were talking about that. The Caldwell was kind of ahead and maybe threw it away a little bit, but big win for Mikhailov. I saw Brian Moore called him out again. He wants that rematch. It probably doesn't make sense at the moment, but Moore goes in, gets a win in 2 weeks' time or 3 weeks' time. Maybe things change. Maybe he calls him out again. You could see it happening, but I think they're kind of on different paths at the moment. Maybe down the line. Big win then for Diana Azagrova. She beat Alejandra Lara. That was a split decision as well. A close fight. And Grant Neal, again, a split decision against Karl Albrechtsen. Watching that fight, I think it kind of just went the right way, all right. Probably wasn't watching as closely or as attentively as I would the higher up fights. But yeah, two fight losing stretch now for Albrechtsen after losing to Karl Moore as well. So a tough time for him in that division after, some very, very good wins previous to that inside and outside of Bellator. Same could be said in for Matt Roshkov, I suppose, who, has had a tough time with it recently, but Chris Gonzalez came in, Uriah Faber in his corner and looked really, really good. Ended up winning that fight, got landed the right cross, knocked him down and then grounded strikes after that. And then I suppose we got into the big important fights of the night. We had the highly ranked Steve Mowry undefeated 10-0 against Ali Asayev, former PFL champion at 9-0. And it ended in a draw, unanimous draw, very good stuff by the judges. The first round and the third round were Isayev's, used a lot of wrestling, just kind of won those rounds. The first one was close because he didn't really do much on top. He did more in the third. In the second round in, Mowry just kind of beat him from pillar to post, got on top, landed loads of shots. Herb Dean was the ref, so that was the only reason it wasn't stopped. Genuinely, it was such a beating that I was thinking 10-7. And if a judge had given it 10-7, I don't think they would have been far off at all. So I think this was either a draw or a Mowry win, despite the fact that he lost 2 of the 3 rounds, which is a hard one, I suppose, to fathom, but you get what I mean. But look, they're probably going to match these 2 guys up again, you would have to say. Although, look, the main event, it was for the heavyweight title. They're going to need a challenger, and I firmly believe that the winner of this would have been the next challenger. Now, do they move forward and put Mowry into that space because he's kind of the Bellator guy and he's been there for a while? Do they put Isayev into it, who's the fittest one? Maybe someone comes out with a broken hand or something, they might not be in that position. So it'll be interesting to see with that one. But when it's a draw, you usually think, okay, we're going to run it back. And that's usually, I think, what Bellator would do as well. But I suppose we'll see on that one. Henry Corrales didn't put on a fantastic performance against Ahmed Magomedov on my bets over in Sherdog. I gave this as one of my bets for the week. I gave him at plus 375, I think. He ended up at plus 470, so an almost 5-1 underdog here, and he won easily, to be honest. Like, Magomedov got a couple of takedowns early, or not even really takedowns. He just kind of, you know, he took him down, but Corrales got straight back up, held him against the fence a bit. But then Corrales just started to kick the leg, and he was landing better shots in the feet. And in the second and third round, he just won that fight. I would say pretty handily, to be honest. Magomedov was landing a few shots and all, but I know Henry Corrales is one of these guys maybe that people think of, he's like the mid-level Bellator guy, but that fight against Praborchenko and fights before it, I analysed that one, you know, very, very closely at the time because I was doing the breakdown for Bellator. I was like, this guy has really, really good takedown defense, and he's not easy for a wrestler to beat whatsoever. And he showed that again last night. That's, 2 out of 3 fights or 2 out of 4 fights maybe, where he comes in there against the Eastern European wrestler, heavy wrestler, and they can't take him down, they can't beat him, and he ends up beating them on the feet. Brilliant, absolute brilliant. And I said on that as well, himself and Lorenz Larkin, I fancy both of them. Now, Larkin a little bit less. I think my official pick was Corrales. I think my official pick was, my official pick at the price was definitely Corrales. But I think I was going for Berkamov over Larkin just about. But again, Lorenz Larkin, he just showed what he is. He's just like, I think for Corrales, you look at Corrales and think he's a power puncher, but it's obviously down the way. It's at 145, so it's harder to be that. But he's just a very good technical fighter all around. Whereas Lorenz Larkin, also a very good technical fighter all around, but has that insane power that he lands. And it was an elbow here, a little bit different. You know, it's not your normal punch power, I suppose. But the power that he generates is absolutely tectonic at times. Absolutely huge. You know, maybe he hasn't shown it as much in Bellator as you'd expect. You know, he's had 3 or 4 decisions in Bellator against maybe guys you'd be expecting him to beat more easily, and he has beaten almost all of them. But that power that he can show is absolutely phenomenal, and if he can keep showing that against this sort of level, then, you know, sky's the limit for Lorenz Larkin. I mentioned it last week that, like, every time Larkin fights, he should be in title contention, but it seems like he kind of isn't recently. Now, I know there's a big hold up in that division because there was the interim champion, and now obviously in 3 weeks in Ireland we're going to see the interim champion fight the champion, and then you've Jason Jackson, who's like the obvious next guy. And then, you know, MVP probably should have won the title in the interim fight against Storley. So do we do Larkin against MVP? Is that the way it goes? And the winner of that, you know, is the next guy after Jason Jackson? I think maybe that's the way you go with it. But anyway, very good performance from Lorenz Larkin. Brendan Ward and Sabah Homasi delivered exactly what Brendan Ward and Sabah Homasi were always going to deliver, an absolute bloodbath barn burner. And this opened up the main card on CBS. It was only 3 fights, which was wise, I think, from Bellator. And this was excellent. You know, maybe not the best technical fight in the world, but who cares about that? Brendan Ward went wrestling at the start, and I thought he was going to continue to do that. But at one stage, he kind of started to get the better of Homasi and made a very intelligent move to kind of adjust over from being a wrestler into being a striker in the fight itself. And I'm sure he wasn't afraid to strike or anything like that, but game plan A1 was to wrestle, it seems like. And he was just getting the better of him because, like, there's a certain point in a fight where you realize if you're like Sabah Homasi or others as well, sometimes realize it. You're like, I'm the better striker here. I'm a harder puncher, but this guy has way more of a what's the word I'm looking for? Chin is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. He's way more endurance and way more of a capability to take damage than I have. And even though I'm a better striker and even though I can hit harder, he's going to win because of that. And you could kind of see that in Homasi's face for, like, I don't know, going into the 3rd minute of the fight nearly even, and then the massive head kick and a knockout from Brendan Ward was brilliant. Blake Grice, I believe, was the referee here, who's not a great referee, and I don't think he saved Homasi from the additional damage he could have been saved from here, to be honest. So, yeah, but, you know, I don't like seeing that. And the second I saw the referee in this fight on CBS, which is a big thing for Bellator, I was like, oh, Jesus, that's not going to end well. And it didn't, but I suppose it ended well for Brendan Ward. He got a big knockout and looked very, very, very good against the guy who's, you know, not, I suppose, a spoon-fed opponent on the guy on the comeback trail like happened recently, which is maybe a little bit unfair in Brendan Ward, but I think that's a good thing to do as well. But Homasi, good, solid Bellator fighter. Brendan Ward, now that again, after being there for years, we thought maybe he's a little bit past his prime after all the issues with addiction and all of that. But he's looking great here. Absolutely back. And then we did 2 title fights. At middleweight, Johnny Eblen, Anatoly Tokov. A really high level fight, I would say, for the first 2 rounds. Close first, but I gave it to Eblen. Close second, very close, very high level second. I thought Anatoly Tokov was going to kind of take over a little bit in that second round, and he was winning it, and I still gave it to him, but the last kind of minute changed this fight a lot. Eblen landed one nice shot and he pushed Tokov against the fence. I think he kind of even wobbled him, knocked him down. I think Tokov actually wobbled Eblen as well. He hit him like the top of the head, and I don't know, maybe Tokov broke his hand or something or on that, because it looked like a hand shatterer, if we're being honest. But the point after that was that Tokov looks so tired, and you can see it sometimes in fights, and it's overplayed, or lads get their second wind, and the commentary don't call it. I thought Big John did a great job of calling this. He's like, look at Tokov with his mouth open, he looks tired, even when he was kind of winning the fight in the second round. So it was even before Eblen had that big comeback, but that big comeback kind of, and when I say big comeback in the round, it wasn't a big comeback. It kind of inflated his level of tiredness, and I think from then on Eblen did a lot of smart things. You know, he went for the takedowns at the right time, he showed that he is better cardio, better all-round fighter, and just won all the rest of the rounds in pretty easy fashion. There was no coming back from Tokov. I thought the one thing in the first round that was very interesting was Tokov was able to make the adjustment to Eblen to Eblen's game. And then I don't think Eblen was actually able to make the adjustment until the end of the second round. So he went a good 6 minutes maybe, where Tokov was winning that fight in many different ways. Like, there was one stage Eblen was throwing punches and missing every single one. Like, it wasn't even funny. But he's still only 13 fights into his career against the guy who was 35 fights into his career. That was, I suppose, inevitable nearly. So, great learning fight as well for Johnny Eblen against a high-level middleweight. And Eblen is only going to go further in that division. I don't see many guys there who are going to beat him, if I'm being honest. I personally think, I think he's the best middleweight in the world if you want to put him up against the champions from every other division. I think he'd have issues with Robert Whittaker, to be honest. I was talking to Tim Burke, I think, from is he still with Bloody Elbow? I think he is. Or, well, you know, Bloody Elbow's the situation's in, but shout out to Tim. And he was kind of saying the same thing, and it made me think, and I was like, yeah, maybe he's right, but I think he'd beat Adesanya. I think he'd beat Pereira. I saw Ariel put up a poll who'd win Eblen or Pereira, and 70 or 83% said Pereira, and I was just thinking of that, like, none of you lads know shit about MMA. No shit. Eblen, I don't think it'd be a matchup. I think Eblen would absolutely destroy Pereira. I don't think it'd be even close, to be honest. I think he beat Adesanya pretty handily as well. So, yeah, Eblen is like what they don't have in the UFC, which is a high-level athlete wrestler at middleweight. You know, and then now they have another division, obviously, but not at middleweight. But yeah, great win for Eblen, and he moves on. He called out the winner of Mousasi and Edwards. So, yeah, that'll be fun. And then with Ryan Bader, look, you know, just beat Fedor up, took him down, landed a lot of shots ground and pound, and that was it in 2.5 minutes. It was just a destruction. Fedor looked like completely out of shape, I thought, in this one. Even when he was running around beforehand, I was like, oh shit, this is not going to be good for him. And it was a non-event of a fight, really, and that was that. You know, Bader, 39 years of age, now coming up 40, the young whippersnapper in that Bellator heavyweight division, got the win here, and he moves forward. As I said, who's going to be next? We don't know. But look, the real story was Fedor. He, a legend of the sport, you know. This is his second or third retirement now. Is it going to be real? Who knows? I suppose we'll see on that. But a guy who was always kind of that, you know, the bear in the woods, you know? It's like, we know he's there, we know he's scary, we don't know too much about him, we're all kind of afraid of him a little bit. And if you're getting too close to him, he'll absolutely rip your head off. You know, that's what Fedor Emelianenko was. I was thinking about it last night, watching it, and I was like, this is the last ever guy like this, I think. And they Bellator did a good job of saying this is the end of Pride and this is the end of the year, and they did a beautiful job of bringing all the fighters in at the end, and I really liked it, and I shout out to Bellator for that. But my main takeaway was that's like, there's no fighter anymore that we don't know loads about, you know, that we barely ever hear them speak, that we hold up as this mythical figure almost. There's none at the moment. Like you look at all the guys coming through, and all the best fighters are the most famous fighters in the world. Let's say McGregor, we know everything about him. Sean O'Malley, the one coming through, or John Jones, or Cejudo, or there's none. There's absolutely none. You know, I think it takes away something from MMA that we don't have that anymore, to be honest. And to have, I suppose, I didn't live through all of it, obviously, because I'm only a whippersnapper myself, and I wasn't watching fucking Pride when I was in 16 or 15 or whatever in school with no internet or whatever. But, you know, I remember, I think it was the Matt Linland fight, a friend of mine who I was friends with in school, and I was in college for like a year or something. I think it was in 2007, and I started watching MMA around then, and he was like, oh, Fedor's fighting. And I was like, oh, Fedor? Who's this Fedor lad? And he's like, he sent me a link on Facebook, I remember, on Facebook messages, and it was this dodgy Russian link, and I got a fucking virus on my computer and everything. But I think I watched the fight, it's so long ago, everyone knows my memory shot, but that was the sort of thing Fedor was like. He was like, this guy. I remember I was working somewhere once, and it was very funny. One of the lads, they were talking about, do you know that Russian fighter? Do you know that Russian fighter? And then one of the other lads, that real dumb, he goes, who, Chuck Liddell, is it? And everyone just started laughing at me, like, what are you talking about? And this was before MMA was kind of known, I suppose. It would have been around the 2006, 2007 time as well. Probably, yeah, 2007, 2008 maybe. And they were talking, I remember lads talking about Fedor, and I was into MMA at that stage, and I was listening to the lads talking about it. I was like, okay, yeah, this is a guy. And then a few of these lads, okay, there's more than me who likes MMA in Ireland and things like that. So, you know, it was great to have that, I suppose. And he was one of those guys where if you knew him, I suppose, in a place like this, maybe it was different in America or Japan or Russia or something, but you knew something else about MMA, which was very fun. But yeah, a legend. And, you know, we'll probably do a career retrospective on Fedor at some stage, go back and watch a lot of his fights, because he absolutely deserves it. But a legendary career. And, you know, he goes out having fought in a Bellator title fight, which is close enough to the top. So congratulations to him, and a great career. Let's move over to the UFC, and this is going to be short and sweet, because a lot of these fights were like road to the UFC fights. Who cares? Who gives a shit sort of fights? So, yeah, the first three fights tonight all started off with submissions. Tatsuya Tiara got a beautiful triangle armbar, which was absolutely, I think it was more of an armbar than a triangle, if we're being honest. Then Jong Young Park beat Dennis Tulinin with a rear naked choke, as did Sung Park against Choi. Congratulations to all of them. Rinya Nakamura, he looked very, very good. He landed a straight left knockout in the first round against Kamaza. Then Lee and Jubilee won the other two road to the UFC things. Congratulations to both of them. Adam Fugas won then against Kinoshita, who I was calling Conor Shita because he looks a bit like Conor McGregor in the way he fights and the stance and all of that. So, yeah, there you go with that one. Very good performance from Fugat. And then Duo Chai against Kyle Nelson was a draw. Majority draw, I believe. So Chai won it 29-27, I think, on one card, and then it was 28-28 in the others. Chai won at least 2 rounds there. A lot of people were giving out about the point deduction, and everyone knows I'm very much anti-point deductions for a lot of things, but this one was clear and obvious to me, I think. Chai was in full guard, if I'm not mistaken, had almost the kind of the can opener on Nelson, and then just brought his head forward and headbutted him right into an area where he already had a cut. So, like, sometimes in MMA, and I know if Graeme was here as well, he'd agree with me, but we see fouls and we always call them unintentional. But, like, sometimes they're obvious. The one that always sticks out to me is Rivera and Faber. It was an eye poke. It was like the most obvious eye poke ever, but they called it unintentional because everything's unintentional. But like I think this one was one of the ones where it's hard to call it unintentional. It looks so obvious. And I think for something like that, a point should be taken, and I think it was rightly taken, and I think it was the right result in the end as well. So, and then we got into the fights where I started to fall asleep because, Devin Clark and Marcin Tybura both won the unanimous decisions. That Tybura-Ivanov fight was a tough one to get through. From what I remember, the Clark fight, Da Young almost finished him at the start of the first and then started getting taken down and stuff. But then the main event, Sergey Spivak and Derek Lewis, this was another kind of a shellacking. Spivak just kept taking him down and pulling him down. At one stage, Derek Lewis landed on his head. He was just landing ground and pound, and Lewis was doing his thing where he just stands up, but Spivak was just simply holding onto him and pulling him down again, and then Derek Lewis got tired and ended up getting arm triangled and finished. Look, the problem with Derek Lewis is I don't know. We went through a phase where Derek Lewis needed to be more mad Derek Lewis. And then he started to put it all together. Like, well, okay, maybe he does. Maybe the new tactical Derek Lewis is working a bit. But that's gone backwards again. And I think Derek Lewis is going to have to get crazy again. He's going to have to start throwing fucking wheel kicks and throwing bombs. Getting tired after 3 minutes, grand, taking a rest. But he needs to bring that back. This, dropping weight, cutting weight type of Derek Lewis is... Just blow up to fucking 300 pounds, cut down to 265, and throw bombs for as long as you can. You're going to probably lose anyway, but you were great at that. That's what Derek Lewis was great at, winning fights where he probably shouldn't have won. And I think he needs to get back to that. But for Spivak, look, a very good win. Showed what he can do against that level of fighter, and that was that kind of stuff. I will leave it at that, lads. Thanks everybody for listening. It was a very fun podcast. Actually, today is the 8th anniversary of the SevereMMA podcast. So shout out to Andrew and obviously Graeme, and we kind of did the 400 episodes last week, so it almost coincided. But 8 years has been a long time and a very, very fun time to do all of this, and long may it last, and all of that. So I'll have the Q&A out on Wednesday over on Patreon. If you haven't signed up on Patreon, please do. Patreon.com/SevereMMA podcast. You can add your questions now. I haven't recorded it yet. I won't be recording it until Tuesday, probably, maybe Monday night. So get them in there. And thanks to everybody for listening. Please click the subscribe button. Don't be a freeloader. Please subscribe. It's free. Come on. And tell a friend. I'll leave it at that. God bless. Goodbye. We'll see you next Tuesday. Or probably Sunday.